Hey, do you need to comply with the EUDR? In this podcast episode, I'm going to talk to Caroline, who is the founder of Nadar, which is a company that focuses on satellite data for sustainability. She's an absolute expert on the European deforestation regulation and what it means for companies and how companies can adapt to it. So, enjoy. Hey, Caroline. And first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. For those of the listeners that don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What are you doing right now? And how did you get into this podcast?
Yeah, hi Daniel. Thanks for having me on the AtlasZero podcast. So I'm Caroline. I'm one of the three co-founders, as well as the CEO of nadar. So we at nadar basically provide satellite monitoring for nature. So we're a software developer that processes different types of satellite data to help better monitor forests and natural ecosystems in general. So basically, we started the company to provide a better monitoring that our customers and clients can really base their decisions on high quality and reliable data. And we started off in the voluntary carbon market, so analyzing different types of forest carbon project, how much carbon stock, above ground biomass is stored in the trees, in the forests, and also how does forest cover change over time, and where does deforestation occur. So we built up a satellite-powered monitoring system to be able to reliably detect deforestation in different ecoregions of the world. And then actually already the EU deforestation regulation came up, and we said, okay, we have this monitoring system. Why not bring it into a new market and now help all the companies that are affected by the regulation to prepare for it and base their decisions on a valid database.
Okay. Yeah, super interesting. Before we dive into the EUDR a little bit more, I would be super curious to know, like using satellite data for sustainability is quite a specific topic, I feel. So how did you get started into that? How did you came up with the idea that this is something that you can help with?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very niche topic, I would agree, looking from
Mhm.
the outside. But for me, I studied it. So I studied
Oh,
Earth observation science in my master's degree. It was basically super focused on satellite data and geodata analysis, and kind of looking back, my path kind of prepared me for founding my own company. That was somehow always in the back of my mind, and then I kind of stumbled into it and found a first idea in the master's program, where I also met one of my co-founders, Han-Min, and then from there on, the idea kind of evolved. So we both had the passion for technology and for nature, and specifically for forests. So it was quite clear to combine both and start our own company, nadar.
nice. That's super cool to see that journey. And when you started with the masters, did you already knew that you wanted to use that for sustainability, or is that now a connection that recently was added?
Yeah, I knew it basically was the plan. So I did a
Mhm.
more business or and technical bachelor's degree that was more focused on business and data science, and I really liked the data science part, but I was missing the sustainability part. So this is how I kind of jumped into the master's program to combine the programming part, data science, with more other sustainability application and really dive into natural resource monitoring.
Yeah, super interesting. And now there's the EUDR, which basically is like the perfect preparation for your topic right now. For those of the listeners that don't know what the EUDR is, can you explain it maybe first in simple terms so that we know what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So the EU regulation on deforestation-free products, or the EUDR as it is called, is basically a new regulation by the EU that prohibits certain products from being imported into the EU if they have caused deforestation. So it's about 7 specific commodities and derived products, such as coffee, cocoa, soy, rubber, and cattle and timber, and all the derived products. So also chocolate, leather, car tires, etc. So really covering a broad range of products that is kind of affecting almost everybody as a consumer. So it's quite surprising that a lot of people still don't know about it yet. And the regulation is coming into force in December this year. So from then onwards, the companies who are importing these commodities into the EU need to provide certain information to be allowed to continue their imports.
Okay. And you just said that like all companies importing this, is this like who is in the scope of this? So all companies that are importing those goods, or how is the scope defined?
Yeah, exactly. So it's every company that is importing directly into the EU is kind of the operator who's the first point of contact into the EU, and then basically all of those companies that are importing these 7 specific commodities as well as the derived products. And then there is a further differentiation between different sizes of companies. So, for example, SMEs, so smaller and medium-sized businesses, have a bit, let's say, reduced requirements of which due diligence they need to perform. And they also have 6 months more time to prepare until the regulation is applicable to them. So for them, it's not from 30th December this year, but from June 2025.
Okay, but those 2 dates like are both quite recently. So within the next year, then all companies will have to start to comply with the EUDR.
Yeah.
You already mentioned a little bit the requirements, but what can I understand? Like, how can I imagine the requirement? Like, what do companies need to report on? So let's say I'm working in a company and we are importing one of those goods. What do we need to prepare for?
Yeah, so on a high level, the products that are imported into the EU must be free of deforestation or degradation. They must have been produced in accordance with the laws of the country of production, and they need to be covered by a due diligence statement when during the import. And specifically, that means that the companies need to provide or gather data on where the products or commodities were produced. So really where on which plot of land they were produced. They need to provide the geolocation data of that plot of land. So really providing geographical data, for example, on the boundary of the field where, for example, coffee was produced, or that's like the geolocation data. Then they need to provide further proof on the deforestation-free status of the plot. So they need to ensure that there hasn't been deforestation after a specific cutoff date. So the EU said, okay, we cannot stop or undo historical deforestation, but this acts like a stopping point. So they said the cutoff date is the 31st of December 2020, and there's every new product that is being imported is not allowed to have contributed to deforestation after that date. So the companies need to ensure through different possibilities like satellite data, or also on the ground data, maybe also some data on when the plantations were set up, that they weren't deforesting land after December 2020. And then you have to gather further data on your suppliers, so contact details, for example, also which product you're specifically importing, also further trade information on that, and also, of course, information on yourself as the importing company. And all of this data at the end needs to be gathered in a so-called due diligence statement. So this statement then contains all of the information in a standardized format.
Okay. And then the first time that this data needs to be included in the due diligence statement will then be at the end of this year for the larger companies, right?
Exactly. So
Okay.
all imports from 30th December this year will need to be covered by a due diligence statement. So it's directly during customs, during the trade process, you will need to add this due diligence statement so you're able to further continue your importing.
Okay, I see. I already talked to some companies about their experience more with the CSRD, but also with the EU regulations in general. And I see that especially transparency in their value chain is a big topic, which is quite difficult because there's a lot of communication involved, because there's like not a lot of data in there. So where exactly do you or how do you approach the topic with nadar, and what is the help that you're offering to companies to like help with all the transparency and then ultimately with becoming compliant with the EUDR?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main challenges, of course, of the regulation that you just mentioned. You need the traceability and transparency into your supply chain. So for some companies, of course, it's easier because they have more direct trade relationships with their producers or their suppliers. So they know where their products are coming from. In most cases, they also already have some geodata, for example, through certification programs like Rainforest Alliance or Fair Trade or organic certifications that also already comply some sort of geolocation data of the field. So then it's kind of an easier starting point for the EUDR. But of course, on the other hand, you have more also those companies that don't even know who are their direct suppliers, or more who are the indirect suppliers. So they maybe just know the broader region of a country where their products, for example, their coffee or their cocoa is coming from, but they don't know the specific supplier or don't know the specific location, let's say. So for them, of course, it's quite a huge task to get to this to this data. Specifically, if you have a lot of you have a global supply chain that is very scattered, as in coffee or cocoa, for example, with a lot of smallholder farmers. Of course, this is quite an issue to gather the data in the first place. And regarding our work on the EUDR, so we offer an end-to-end solution. So we're helping in all steps of the required due diligence. So from the first step of really gathering the geodata, we can help, for example, in onboarding the suppliers, going through the steps of the supply chain, for example, to reach the supplier who is really in charge and potentially has the data already or needs to map the data of the farms. We also help with mapping the fields. For example, we have a mobile app as well as our web platform, I would say, where you can really easily gather this geolocation data. So and also another challenge that I would see, or I see quite often with the companies, is having the geodata is the one thing, but having good quality geodata that is in a format or in a standard that you can actually send to the EU through the information system is a whole nother topic. So we see that oftentimes there is some data there, but once you really get into the data, you see a lot of errors. For example, that not maybe the coffee plantation was mapped, but a shed somewhere in an urban area was mapped. Or, for example, that the plot of land is located somewhere in the ocean because something went wrong with the coordinate system in the data. So there are a lot of issues in the data, and I think many companies are not aware of this because it's a very, as you said in the beginning, it's a very niche topic. You need to know how to handle this geospatial data and even how to check it. So it's a huge risk also of just sending out the data to the EU, of course, without having checked. Because then if you see these errors in the data, maybe the EU authorities will do the check and see these errors. This, of course, could also be an issue of non-compliance, I would say, that the company hasn't performed sufficient due diligence. So this is also something, companies should be aware of.
Okay. And the quality of the geolocation data, is that something that you solve by mapping the places correctly, or how do you can improve the quality?
Yeah, I mean, the ideal case is that you already have high quality data from the start. So therefore, we also streamline this process with our mobile app by providing also guidelines on how to correctly map polygons, what to be aware of, etc. But another step, of course, if you already have some data, is then that we can automatically check it with our software. So you could just, let's say, import all the geodata you already have or you have received from your suppliers into our software, and we do an automated check according to a multitude of factors. And then you get a feedback for each plot. Okay, is it fine? Is the quality fine, or are there some issues? Do I have to speak to my suppliers, for example, again, for them to check on the data? And really having this kind of quality control before it then goes to the next step of really checking if there was deforestation on that specific plot.
Okay. And how can your software know whether this data is correct? I can guess how you can do it with like, okay, if the plot of land is in the ocean, that's
Yeah.
probably wrong. But how can you, or because I assume that then the software does it by itself and you don't have to like double check everything.
Yeah.
So how can a software determine, maybe just like very simply explained, but
Yeah.
how can a software determine whether a space is then actually accurate or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. You definitely need more contextual information. So we use a multitude of geospatial data sources, I would say. So of course we use raw satellite imagery from different sources, but also, for example, different satellite-based data sets. So for one check, for example, to see if the plot is located actually on farmland or even in an urban area or in a settlement, you then of course need information on where are the settlements in a specific country, in a specific region, and you need reliable data for that. And then you can do an automated check if it's located in one of those areas or not, or is it located in farmland, for example. Another check would be about the quality or let's say the geometrical quality of the polygon or point data, so of the geolocation data. For example, what we often see is that you have a polygon that is like a zigzag. So during
What
map,
is the polygon?
a
Just
polygon,
so,
a polygon is basically the boundary of your field that is digitized. So if you have a field, then you would just walk around the boundary or digitize it via hand in a map. And that's then the polygon, that geospatial format. And normally it should be, of course, around the boundary of the plot, but maybe during mapping, somebody went the wrong way through the plot, and then your polygon looks something like this. And you cannot even identify the field anymore. And this is something, there are a lot of issues in this kind of direction that you can automatically check through different formulas, I would say.
Okay. But then like the end goal is basically that all of the different suppliers that like have any of those goods, that they actually map their fields and that we have quality geolocation data for all the supply chains so that we just have like a coherent way to like check whether there was deforestation or not.
Yeah, exactly. You need the clear polygon or maybe also a point. If your farm or your field is smaller than 4 hectares, a point would be sufficient. But for the polygons, you need good data that actually represents the field in a reliable way. And then the first goal, I would say, of EUDR getting ready or EUDR compliance is really to have this data, gather the data, and have it in a good quality or in a sufficient quality for the EU, and then also bring it into the format for the EU. That's again a next issue. Moving from the quality to the actual format, I would say. The EU is also very specific that you need to provide one specific file type in a certain specific format for their system again at the end, where you then upload your due diligence statement. So that's the next issue. The format is called GeoJSON. So it's a geospatial file format, but in reality, I would say only experts would use this file format that are really working a lot with geospatial data. Most people, specifically in producing countries, wouldn't use GeoJSON from what I'm experiencing. So that's the next step. You have your data in a whole other format, and now you need to bring it into this one specific format for the EU, which is also another challenge for companies.
Yeah. So sounds quite complicated. Okay, let's say that I'm a company and I actually manage to like get quality data and I get it into the right format. Is there another challenge that I have to look out for, or what do you see in your experience? Like, are those the main two challenges?
I mean, the next challenge is the deforestation status of your plots, of your farm plots. So
Mhm.
or to be able to continue your importing into the EU, you need to ensure that the plot is deforestation free. So you need some sort of databases, of course, to check if there has been deforestation on your farm after December 2020, so after the cutoff date of the EUDR. So the most straightforward case is, of course, to use satellite data or satellite-powered maps for that. And then you get to the next issue of defining what is actually deforestation under the EUDR and how to check for
Yeah.
it. So the EUDR has a very specific definition of deforestation, which is the conversion of natural forest to agricultural land. So to be able to check if there was deforestation, you first need to know if the plot had forest on it in December 2020. And for that, you need
Mhm.
the definition of a forest, and you need maps that are adapted to this definition. And this is the issue we see with public data sets that are out there. For example, the EU Forest Observatory, the maps that the EU published, or also data that is available in Global Forest Watch, for example. They are unfortunately not aligned to this definition because we
Mhm.
have issues in differentiating a natural forest from other tree crops. So, for example, from cocoa trees, from coffee trees, from rubber trees, from palm oil trees. So, a lot of also timber plantations. So, basically, almost all of the commodities under the EUDR, they have issues differentiating them from natural forest. So it could be the case that you have let's say you have a coffee plantation and it's growing in an agroforestry system. So you'll have a lot of shade trees on your plantation, also a lot of coffee trees. So in the satellite image, your plantation will look very green, but also your forest will look very green. So basically, to put it in simple terms, the satellite or the model will look for very green spots on your satellite image. So then
Mhm.
both will be potentially mapped as a forest, both your natural forest, but also your coffee plantation. Of course,
Mhm.
that's unfortunately not the reality because your coffee plantation is a coffee plantation. It has been maybe for 10, 15 years already, but now it's grown in such a mature state that it looks very green and very similar to a forest in satellite data. So then if you,
Mhm.
in the next step, maybe do large-scale pruning of the trees, or you would remove old plantation trees, this could be mapped as deforestation in these maps. Although it wouldn't be deforestation under the definition of the EUDR, because your
Mhm.
land was not forest anymore, it was already a coffee plantation. And then you have these, let's say, red tagged plots in your supply chain, maybe a lot of them in certain regions where the algorithm performs very poorly. And then you
Mhm.
have the issue, should you now exclude all these farmers, even though you know there was no forest anymore for the past 10, 15 years? Or will you now go into the field, send somebody into the field and check each of the locations, maybe take further geotag pictures as further proof, let's say, that it's not deforestation? So this is a huge issue I see or we see in the data. And I'm wondering how it will move forward in the next months, because I think a lot of companies have just started with the whole EUDR process. So they're not at this stage yet of actually seeing what it means for their own supply chain. So I think a lot
Yeah.
of developments will come up in the next few months.
Yeah. I also fear that from my experience, a lot of the times, like companies have people that are now taking care of CSDR and EUDR and so on, but they do not have such a deep sustainability background, and especially not in geodata like you have right now. So I feel like for them, it will be very difficult to assess this issue and then come up with a solution in how to like solve this issue.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any recommendations to those companies and those sustainability managers that are now faced with such a task, or maybe also the different tasks in the EUDR? Like, what should they do? What would you recommend them to do to just get into the topic a little bit more and like go more towards compliance?
I mean, I would of course recommend working with a service provider that has more experience and really focuses on EUDR specifically, and also has a background in, I would say, geoinformation systems, and specifically also remote sensing, because it is a very specific topic. And I mean, apart from that, get started now, and don't wait, because it is quite a task. Specifically, even getting all the geodata, then checking all the data. I mean, you can always do it manually if you like. It will just take a little bit longer, but get started now. And I mean, there are also free resources out there. There are a lot of webinars from a lot of different organizations to really understand what the EUDR means. And there are also a lot of best practices, I would say, and helping guidelines to get started with.
Yeah, this is also a question that I receive quite often, whether I know of any free guides or free templates or something like this. Do you have anything of those yourself, or any that you can recommend?
I mean, what we have a template that I could send you to get started with the EUDR, and I'm quite active on LinkedIn and in our blog, and we post about all the most important updates around the EUDR. Also, for example, recently I wrote a post about the EU information system traces and about their specifications for the due diligence statement. So also what types of geolocation data and which format, etc. So I can also recommend that.
Yeah, that sounds super helpful. Please send it to me so I can put it into the show notes so that people can just easily find it there.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I have one last question that I would like to ask you. So for those sustainability managers that listen to the topic, they know they have to face the EUDR and they have an upcoming meeting like tomorrow or next week about this topic. What is the one thing that they should take away from this conversation that they can go to the meeting and try to like let other people know, or what should they share about this podcast that you think is quite valuable for them to know and to implement in their companies?
I would say two things or two topics that I feel like are still a bit underrepresented. The one topic is the quality of the geodata, because the EU is not specifically mentioning it in all of their guidelines in the regulation. But of course, it's implicitly given that you need to accurately map the fields, and shouldn't send data to the EU that has a lot of data errors and issues in it, because it could be a sign of that the company didn't perform enough due diligence. So the geodata quality is an important topic to be aware of, and then be aware of false deforestation alerts. That just because maybe some public data said that there's deforestation or tree cover loss, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was actually deforestation under the EUDR. So you should definitely cross-check that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds super helpful. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all of your knowledge. I really feel like that I learned a lot and that we really dove deep into the topic. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks as well. Thanks for having me. Was fun, and maybe talk to you soon again.
Yeah, I hope so. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, if you come this far, thank you very much for listening to the AtlasZero podcast. If you are interested in this topic, we just launched the AtlasZero Navigator, which is basically a product compiled of all the interviews we ever done, all the materials we either created or collected, comprised into one product. It basically helps you to understand all the sustainability reporting requirements of the EU, and we really think it's super helpful. So if you're interested, definitely check out the link below and check out our product. And also, and I have to ask this, please like and subscribe to our channel. Like, it helps us a ton to reach more people. And at the end, our goal is to help as many companies as possible. so you can help us a little bit in achieving that. Thank you very much, and I hope I see you very soon.